I have played a lot of The Binding of Isaac. Like, a lot. I'm not going to tell you how many hours I've played, because it's embarrassing, so I'll just give you a hint. It has 4 digits, and the first digit isn't 1. But in my defense, I'm not alone. A lot of people online seem to have played a lot of this game. It's one of those games where there's like a community-wide joke among the players that the game is super addicting. And you can tell just by looking at how engaged the community is. Binding of Isaac fans will play hundreds of hours of the game and then watch their favorite Binding of Isaac YouTuber play 1,000 episodes more. If you want proof of just how much passion people feel for this game, just look at the insane modding community. Some of the mods that have been produced are practically full DLCs. Hundreds of hours of additional gameplay released to the public for free as a passion project by and for the game's biggest fans. People just can't get enough of this silly little game. And so I thought it'd be fun to try and figure out why it is that this game has had such a long shelf life for me and many others. The original Binding of Isaac game was released in 2011. It was a pretty solid Flash game, although admittedly a little rudimentary. In 2014, a remake was released to the public, The Binding of Isaac Rebirth, which was essentially the same game as the original, just with improved graphics and controls and way expanded gameplay. And to be clear, anytime I mention The Binding of Isaac, I'm specifically referring to Rebirth. The story is about a kid named Isaac, who lives with his devoutly religious mom, who is one day ordered by God to kill him. Isaac sees her coming and escapes into the basement. He travels deeper and deeper underground, using his tears as a weapon and confronting his demons. Literally. The Binding of Isaac is what's called a roguelike. Roguelikes are a unique genre of video game. They're characterized by stuff like procedurally generated levels, permadeath, and randomized power-ups. So, to demonstrate the mechanics of a roguelike using The Binding of Isaac, every time you start a new game, you lose all your items and have to start over. Every game you do the same floors: basement, caves, depths, womb. However, the rooms you encounter within these floors are different every time. This randomness is how the game creates variety, despite its simplicity, and even as you repeatedly go through the same floors over and over again. Every new run gives unique opportunities for fun surprises. New pickups, new special rooms, new items, and each of these items is capable of synergizing with other items. For example, you have this item which gives you high damage exploding tears, and this item which massively increases your tears fire rate. The two items combine to become even more powerful than they are independently. Voila, synergy. And when you look at the massive item list, with each item having the potential to synergize with any other item, well, that's just way more additional, random, fun ways the game rewards the player for playing. In the world of psychology, this pattern of rewarding players randomly as they play is called a variable ratio schedule of reinforcement. For context, this has to do with operant conditioning, which is a method of conditioning that involves enforcing a behavior through rewards or discouraging a behavior through punishment. And schedules of reinforcement are just the different patterns of reinforcement that can be used to condition you this way. For example, with a fixed ratio schedule of reinforcement, after you complete a behavior a specific predetermined number of times, you are rewarded. And with a variable ratio schedule of reinforcement, you're rewarded at random intervals for performing the behavior. In The Binding of Isaac, you are constantly presented with random opportunities to improve your run-through. This random schedule of reinforcement causes your nervous system to release neurotransmitters like dopamine, which makes you feel good, and the body wants more. It's the same principle behind why gambling is so addicting. Even when a gambling addict is down $300, the anticipation of a potential future reward keeps the dopamine flowing and the gambler motivated. They just know that the next round they're gonna hit the jackpot. Just like how you know that the next item room you're gonna get mom's knife. Oops, it's scissors. It's always fucking scissors. The Binding of Isaac isn't unique for taking advantage of a variable ratio schedule of reinforcement to keep players hooked. It's very normal for video games to implement random rewards to keep you playing. The Binding of Isaac and other roguelikes just happen to be a very streamlined form of a variable ratio schedule. Their consistent reliance on randomness makes them very effective at hijacking your brain and conditioning you to want to keep playing. Again, just like gambling. Luckily, unlike with gambling, getting hooked on The Binding of Isaac doesn't cost you a ton of money. It just costs you your time. And that's way more precious than money. Anyway, another way I've noticed that this game hijacks my brain has to do with the very simple gameplay design. Because The Binding of Isaac is really simple, like an old arcade game. You're mostly just walking around with the WASD keys and firing with the arrow keys, or whatever is analogous to that on consoles. And this simplicity has always been pretty hypnotic for me. A lot of the time I've spent playing this game, I'd just use it to have something to fidget with while I was watching something else. And I've heard other players echoing that sentiment. I don't want to be generalizing about how most people play this game based on anecdotal evidence, but I'd bet good money that a lot of other people also use this game basically like a fidget cube. 'Cause, let's face it, a lot of us have chronic Gen Z brain. God knows I wish my attention span was stronger, and I'm also a completely hopeless fidgeter, so the simplicity of The Binding of Isaac makes it a soothing distraction. The point is, The Binding of Isaac has a lot of clever gameplay mechanics that it uses to trick your brain into having fun. And that's a good thing, because your brain can't tell the difference between having fun and being tricked into having fun. But beyond the gameplay, I think there are a lot of less concrete things which keep drawing me back to The Binding of Isaac. Because there are a lot of good roguelikes, and a lot of good games with simple controls, and yet, somehow, none of them have held me hostage the way The Binding of Isaac has. I think a big reason this is the case is The Binding of Isaac's strangely nostalgic narrative. I know that sounds weird, let me explain what I mean. The game's story is a reference to the biblical story of The Binding of Isaac, where God instructs Abraham, the common patriarch of the three Abrahamic religions, to sacrifice his son. Abraham agrees, but right before he kills Isaac, he gets a message from God telling him that it was all just a way for God to test his faith. Bible Isaac gets to live and presumably spends the rest of his life being a little bit afraid of his dad. And just like the source material, the game is dark. It explores themes of abuse and grief and tons of other sad stuff. Yet, The Binding of Isaac also has this interesting, childlike vibe that makes it a little bit cozy to return to. Which is funny, because this game really goes out of its way to be as off-putting as possible at all times. The Binding of Isaac has a gross, creepy, depressing sense of humor. The items are all things like his dead dog's disembodied head, or his mom's wig, or IBS. One of the game's main bosses is a fight against your own fetus inside of your mom's womb. Later in the game, it's implied that the game's events are all just Isaac hallucinating as he suffocates to death inside of a toy chest that he locked himself into to hide from his feelings of religious guilt. This game is just morbid. And yet, I can't help but feel like it honestly captures what being a child felt like sometimes. The Binding of Isaac was inspired by co-creator Edmund Macmillan's religious upbringing and explores both the beautiful and terrible parts of religion. The game is blatantly critical of a lot of aspects of religion, like the way it can make people feel guilty for no reason, or how it can make a person extremely pliable to do horrible things. One of the game's final bosses is literally an embodiment of manipulative televangelism. I mean, they barely had to edit the original Bible story in order to adapt it into something terrifying. And yet, the game is so full of lovely Christian iconography. It reminds you of why it is that religion can serve as such a respite for so many people. I think a lot of us can relate to having grown up with complicated feelings about religion. I definitely can. So these story elements make the game feel refreshingly honest, like Isaac is a real kid with a real inner life. And the game maintains this feeling of authenticity in a lot of other ways. The Binding of Isaac isn't modest about bodily functions or gruesome injuries, which rings true, given how many of us spent our childhoods getting sick constantly, or jumping off swing sets like an idiot. The art style is really bubbly and simple, exactly what you'd expect from the daydreams of a disturbed child. Overall, the game is just very good at putting the player in the mindset of a confused kid. You really feel for Isaac, who just seems to be perpetually shocked and horrified by his every experience. He doesn't get why his mom is so mean to him, or why his classmates are making fun of him for wearing a dress. Isaac and the player are both trying to navigate a hostile, confusing world through the eyes of a 6-year-old. All of these elements combine to make playing The Binding of Isaac feel like such a genuine experience. I'm having a hard time putting into words exactly the feeling this game gives me. It's like running into a smell from your childhood and briefly being reminded of what it was like to be a kid. I think that's what really makes this game so easy for me to fall into. Our childhoods are forever out of reach. None of us can ever get that time back, and the closest we'll ever get is to try and approximate the sensory experiences of the past. And if you can find something that is truly evocative of childhood, that feeling can be pretty addicting. In conclusion, The Binding of Isaac is extremely clever with its gameplay mechanics and story. It really knows how to manipulate the player to want to keep playing. And I gotta say, we live in a world where manipulation is one of the most effective tools for corporate exploitation. Think of casinos, the way they condition you into playing for as long as they can get you to, and will just throw you on your ass as soon as you run out of money. Think of the way multi-level marketing schemes will try every dirty trick they have to manipulate people into ignoring their own best interest. Hell, the video game industry is one of the worst offenders, especially for games where most of the players are children. So many randomized loot boxes, so much paywalling of gameplay elements. Stealing from children is a shockingly big part of being a video game corporation nowadays. So, I appreciate The Binding of Isaac. The developers knew what they were doing when they made the game as addicting as it is. They didn't make the game fun by accident, they are just genuinely good at what they do. And while so many video game teams use their talents to create games that try to milk as much money as they can from the consumers, The Binding of Isaac offers something much better, near infinite replayability at a flat price. I am always happy to reward non-predatory gaming industry practices. And okay, it is a little embarrassing how much I've played this game, but it is a quality game. There's this quote by author Marth Trolley Curtin: "Time you enjoy wasting is not wasted time." At least I can say I did enjoy wasting my time.